The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to The Timeline, a Phoenix Suns podcast, and welcome to Internal Development, a series of 5 podcasts covering the 5 most important young Phoenix Suns player. We're on the final episode covering the final player of this series. My name is Mike. I'm here with Sam, as always. Sam, how you doing?
The most important player, some might say, we're covering today. Should be fun. I think it's been a good series so far, and I think we're ready to wrap it up.
Yes, and also joining us, friend of ours and purveyor of Zona hoops, our friend Brandon. Brandon, how you doing?
Doing great. I didn't think I'd be back on The Timeline, but my agent gave me a call when I was in the pool, and, I was happy to jump on. If you know, you know.
Yeah.
What was your reaction in the pool, Brandon? What did you do when you got the call?
I thought it was a prank call at first or something. I was like, this is too good to be true. But, I was just happy to get to work and glad to get a second chance.
All of the exposure that we're gonna rain down on Zona hoops. Glad you could make it.
I had to pull the Cam Payne angle there, just to get it started.
Yeah. Well, you'd be back for the draft because we don't know anything about it. I guess there might not be a draft. The Suns aren't going to have any picks in this next draft, so there could have been a gap year where you didn't join us on the podcast. But I'm glad you're back, and I think this will be a really interesting episode to talk about. I think we should just get right into it. The internal development of Cameron Payne. Now the story about an NBA team that lost everything and the one thing that had no choice but to make them all better. It's internal development. All right, guys, by now, hopefully the listeners know how these go. I know you guys know how it goes. We're going to start off this conversation talking about what Cameron Payne was good at, who he was in this last season. And for him, it's really the only relevant season of his career so far outside of the games that he played with the Suns in the bubble, which was technically last season. It all feels like one big, long season, especially for Cameron Payne. And I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation for Cameron Payne because he's really good at a lot of stuff. And I think we haven't really gotten a chance to sort of pause and take notice at all of the things that he's good at. And I've sort of started this conversation the same for all of these guys. And I'll start with you, Brandon. When you think about Cameron Payne as a player, what comes to mind? Who is he as a player to you?
Cameron Payne is a shifty, bursty, creative microwave scorer that can bring life into an at times lifeless Suns offense. We've seen in the past where things are stagnant and he just comes in and just completely turns the tide of a game, whether it was a regular season, the bubble, or more notably the playoffs. Having that luxury off the bench, just like an energy spark plug that can get downhill on a team that doesn't have a lot of downhill threats with that inside gravity. Just putting that rim pressure on, the occasional pull-up shooting, just everything you need in a microwave bench scorer and more. And I think the leaps he's made, just taking a step back, just where he's come in just like a year is insane, and it's not normal. So I think Suns fans should not take that for granted at all.
What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, they definitely shouldn't take that for granted. I think Brandon said it best there about who Cam is as a player. So I'll just add that, like, when I think of Cam Payne, I was actually really excited to record this episode because I think of a guy who's just pure, unadulterated fun. He's remains one of the greatest stories that I've personally had the pleasure of following in the NBA in all my life, and has quickly skyrocketed up my list of like favorite Phoenix Suns ever. Like, we're talking about Cam, who he is as a player. He does a lot of stuff well, respective to his position and the expectations that were placed upon him. That doesn't mean he's a better player than Devin Booker or Chris Paul or DeAndre Ayton or as talented as all these these guys we've already covered in this series. But he's just so fun. He's so easy to root for. You get so much pleasure like watching him, with the hesitation moves and getting downhill, being crafty, like Brandon said, hitting the pull-up threes, finding guys in the pick and roll. It's just every moment of the campaign experience last year was joyous for me. So that's honestly what I think of. I think of a guy who I am ecstatic that they brought him back on the contract that they did, and hopefully he's got a lot more growth left in him.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, the things that come to mind are one of the best stories in the NBA. Just the story of him being completely out of the league, and some of the things that the Chicago Bulls said about him. As we all know, they said in their second practice with Cameron Payne, they thought he wasn't an NBA player, and in a sense, they were right. He was out of the league pretty quickly, and then made his way back in thanks to Monty Williams and the Phoenix Suns. Monty Williams had a familiarity with him from the OKC Thunder, felt comfortable with him being the backup point guard on the Suns, and he was absolutely right for the bubble and beyond. And the other thing that comes to mind for me, beyond the story about who he is and his return to the NBA, is that he's just kind of the perfect backup point guard. Like, he does a lot of the things that you need the backup point guard position to do exactly right. I mean, you want someone who's capable of scoring. I think often when you think about a sixth man, which I think he's the sixth man for the team because, Cameron Johnson plays so much off the ball. I don't really consider that sixth man in my mind. Like, you think about the sixth man of the year award and the type of person that goes to, it has to go to someone generally that creates their own offense. And that's something that he does really well. But he also is pretty good at creating for other guys. And when we talk about just the scoring in general, listen to this one. And this is I think goes to his shot creation and his ability to play with other guys. But on catch and shoot threes, according to B-Ball Index, he's shooting 48.9% on catch and shoot threes for this last season. I mean, this guy is insanely efficient at scoring, and I think that's like one of the most valuable shots you can imagine at the 3-point shot. I mean, when you're playing with someone like Chris Paul, when you're playing with someone like Devin Booker, you need to be able to play on the ball ideally and off the ball when you're at that guard position, and he's capable of doing both. And I think for him, coming back to the NBA, rejoining an NBA team, shooting and his ability to shoot was probably the most important development for him, because if he couldn't shoot, it may have been over for him. He may not have had a career in the NBA. Not only can he shoot, I think he's shooting better than I even expected. And you mentioned pull-up threes, just for context there too. 37.3% on pull-up threes too, which is one of the best on the Phoenix Suns. So not only is he hitting catch-and-shoot shots at an insane percentage, the pull-up threes is a high percentage too, well above average.
Much better than Devin Booker.
Better than Devin Booker,
It's
on
truth.
par
Yes.
basically
Truth.
with Chris Paul, yeah, essentially. And it's been very good. I think for the shooting, that's probably been the biggest surprise for me when he joined. I mean, I expected almost nothing when he joined the Suns for the bubble. So what surprised you, and what do you think about his shooting, Brandon?
Well, yeah, he's proven me wrong twice already. The bubble, I was like, why the hell are we bringing this guy in? Definitely ate crow happily there. Shooting 50+% from three. I think the shooting's real. And that's definitely like the major point I'd like to start at. Because, like you mentioned, 37 on pull-ups, 44% on the season on 166 attempts, and his balance is pretty uncanny. It's 43% left corner, 44% right corner, 44% above the break, which is where the majority of his attempts came. And just having that balance where there's not really a weak spot in his three-point shot is what makes him such a dynamic scoring threat. When you factor in the burst and just his ability to get downhill, it just makes him such a tough cover. And this, like you said, like this guy was not a good NBA player. He was probably statistically one of the worst before he came here. And to go from that to cooking LeBron James in the NBA playoffs is just, it's unreal. Like, it just doesn't happen. And like, I was going to like research like players that had a similar path to Payne, and there just aren't any. Like, there's some players that have had like their trajectory changed late in their career and like made these leaps kind of out of nowhere, but just to go from out of the league in China, in the G League, to this.
That's a good point.
This quickly.
PJ Tucker.
It just
it's probably
that's a good one. but it's so rare. And I think that's kind of why I'm a little bit higher on his upside and potential. It's not what you typically think of as a 27-year-old, because the NBA is all about three things: talent, opportunity, and confidence. And he's always had the talent, and he's even had some opportunity, but he's never had that confidence. And now that he has that, and he has everything kind of put together in a perfect system, I think that's why he's flourishing. And at this point, like, he's legit. There's no question. His contract is one of the biggest steals of the offseason. So just really cool as a Suns fan to have a guy that genuinely wants to be here and has, had the story that he had to get here.
I'm trying to think of other examples of guys that you were talking about. You mentioned PJ Tucker, Mike. Maybe like Seth Curry, too.
Mm-hmm. Daniel House,
former Suns legends. They're all Suns related.
They are. Yeah. Actually, they are all Suns legends. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, I often think how cool would it have been had Seth Curry had that confidence, to what you were talking about, Zona, when he signed the 10-day contract with the Suns, and like if he could have started his ascent then. I mean, he's just a role player, but would have been a nice like extra 6th or 7th man for the Suns to have throughout these years. Speaking of Seth Curry, Cam shot, you mentioned the 49% on catch and shoot threes, Mike. That was 5th in the entire NBA, just to contextualize it, directly ahead of Seth Curry, as well as Joe Ingles, CJ McCollum. I mean, 5th in the NBA. That's pretty fucking insane, given where this guy was a couple of years ago. You really can't get much better than that.
Yeah, and I love that point about talent, opportunity, and confidence, Brandon. And I think Sam and I, on every single one of these episodes, and I keep teasing it, at some point we're going to have to talk about the challenge that Monty Williams is going to have this coming season, doling out the possessions to these guys. But opportunity-wise, Cameron Payne makes his own. You don't need to call his play. You don't need to run his play. First of all, he's a point guard, so the ball's in his hand more often. But also, he can create for himself really well, like really, really well. And I tweeted the stat out a couple weeks ago after Sam made a Cameron Payne video for players who isolated at least as much as Cameron Payne, which is like a few times a game. Cam is 14th in the whole NBA in points per possession. He is insanely good at creating offense for himself, and part of that is just sort of the running the team thing with him, like understanding when to isolate, understanding when he has the mismatch. And for him, I think being left-handed is almost one of his good his good qualities, because teams tend to forget that he's left-handed and how good he is at going left. And that's something like Sam talked about on our last episode. Sometimes understanding those types of things lags behind, and now that he's had a good season, maybe they start trying to force him right a little bit more. We'll see.
Oh, it's going to be tougher on him this year. No doubt.
Absolutely. But like, to be able to score that efficiently means that you don't have to give him the touches. He's going to take them himself. He's going to find opportunities to score himself, and being able to finish efficiently at the rim, which is something he's insanely good at, especially for his size, and shoot that pull-up three and shoot that catch-and-shoot three, means that guys are constantly sort of in this state of trying to ensure that they have the room to chase him to the rim if he does drive, because he's fast and also very good at sort of changing his speed, or defend that three-pointer. And if they're up on him, his decision-making and understanding when to blow by them or when to shoot that three has been like a veteran. Like he doesn't, and I know technically, right, he's like 26. He's like the oldest guy that we're doing in this series, outside of Cameron Johnson, who I think is 35 years old. But Cameron Payne is technically the age of a veteran, but he's not really a veteran. He hasn't played, this run in the playoffs where he actually started a game and played insanely well in that game was the most he's played in the playoffs. This last season was the most he's played in a season, meaningful minutes he's played in a season. I know he's played starting in some teams, but like, the decision making has been at a very high level, I think, for him. So I think when we're talking about opportunity, he's going to have a lot of it this next season. And as Chris Paul gets older, we've talked about it in previous episodes on this podcast, it's going to be a conversation throughout the year. He might start more games too, and he didn't really start any in this last year. even when Chris Paul sat, there were other guys that started at times in this last year. I have a feeling that he's going to start more games for the Suns going forward, and we're going to see him take a lot of opportunities going forward. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, crazy stat I found is, only one game started last season for the Suns, like during the regular season. He had more in the playoffs, too. Mm-hmm. So 3 starts total. That just kind of shows you that Chris Paul, does not want to sit down. But I think this year in an 82-game season with a short turnaround and everything he went through, the fact that they signed Elfrid Payton kind of, tips to the point that I think there's going to be some back-to-back resting occasionally. And there's going to be more opportunity for Payne. And I think one other thing I'd like to highlight in his strengths is just his ability to use the glass and use the rim. Unlike anyone I've seen, like, he makes a defender decide, like, either you're going to commit to, my strong side, trying to block my shot, and I'll just go up and under and reverse it, or I'm just going to throw it off the glass, like, up and under quicker than you have time to react. Like, the way he does that is so quick that defenders don't really have a chance to react, and that's why he can blow by some of those bigger defenders. And he's really good at freezing the defenders in pick and rolls too. When he gets a bigger guy on him, just attacking that back heel the second they come up and just blowing by them, like whether it was LeBron or even Chris Middleton, the Bucks, Marcus Morris, Paul George. Like, he was taking it right at these guys. So that's something the Suns need too, is just more creation outside of Booker in that regard. So the long-term fit with Booker, I think, too, is something we could talk about later, but I really like it just because you could play him on and off ball, and he fits exactly what you need to give Booker those breaks, but he's also he's not going to be ball dominant either. So it's kind of that perfect blend of, just balance offensively. So looking forward to him in the second unit with Landry Shamet too. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I feel like we've mentioned Landry Shamet's name like a dozen times throughout this series of looking forward to Landry Shamet playing with this guy.
Do you need a trigger warning before we mention it?
No, that's I'll be fine. I think he's going to be good. We've been like, I can't wait for Landry Shamet to play with Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, Cam Payne. Okay, so the entire damn team then. Like, we just want to see Landry Shamet in every possible lineup combination. But yeah, man, Cam's really fun. You were talking again, Zona, about just like him making LeBron look old in the playoffs was one of my highlights. And I think emphasizes the thing that's so funny about Cam is sometimes people say he's really fast, and I kind of disagree with that. I think Cam is fast, don't get me wrong. I think he's got a quick first step and all that, but he went like 14th overall back in the draft, like out of Murray State. And if I recall the scouting reports from like before that draft, it was kind of his lack of elite tier explosiveness that sort of held him back from when he was otherwise like a good, crafty ball handling type prototype. And maybe if he did have really such elite speed, like I think he's got good end-to-end speed in transition, but some of that explosiveness that you might actually expect, and I'll explain in a second why this is not a bad thing. It might sound like I'm criticizing him, but I promise I'm not. Is like maybe he would have been like a top 5 prospect if he really did have that explosiveness. But so the lack of that, you said it best, Mike, really forces him to change speeds. And I think that's where Cam has shown himself in his rejuvenation with Phoenix to be elite. It's not so much that he's the most gifted athletic guy who can just take any player in the NBA off the dribble just through sheer power. But the contrast between the low gears and the high gears and then learning how to time those makes him look faster than maybe he actually is. Like he stays really low on his drives. He stays really balanced. And that's how he gets those guys with, like you were mentioning, Brandon, that really quick, like up and under finger roll that is just elite level touch at this point and seems to go in every time.
Yeah, the change of pace is a really good point. And I think his deceleration, too, is really something that stood out just watching tape again. And then, re-accelerating as soon as he gets you on that back foot and you're off balance. He's so good at reading that. So, yeah, speed's not really what creates those lanes. It's just his basketball IQ and just his feel for reading defenders like in live dribble situations, which really opens up so many driving lanes. And to your point in the Booker episode, actually, I think that's in terms of getting Booker more corner threes, playing with Payne in those downhill actions could really open up some looks in the weak side corner. for Booker. So that's just something I wanted to throw in there because they just don't have a lot of rim pressure across the board. So I think that's kind of where one way it could come into play and help with Booker, getting Booker some more looks where he's elite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll never forget this stat on James Harden. They measured basically his athleticism, and James Harden was not elite in anything except stopping. He was the best at stopping of any player in the NBA. And it's just a reminder of sort of athleticism and how we measure things. It's not always just the top speed, right? It's not necessarily just acceleration. The word that you started with, Brandon, I think to start with this conversation was shifty. And that's what it is. It's being able to stop and go, and that can fool guys. And even when we're talking about, I was looking for things to improve on, and I'll bring this up now because it ended up being not necessarily something that I could say that he needs to improve on. It's a pull-up mid-range shot. When I was thinking about something that he could work on and get better at, I thought about specifically being able to pull up out of a pick and roll from the mid-range area when defenders back up on him, which they do tend to do when he gets them at the rim a few times, right? They'll back up, load up at the rim, and try and stop him from there. And I still think there is some elements of how he can improve in decision-making in that specific scenario, but just pull up 2-pointers. He shot 50% on pull-up 2-pointers this last year, according to the NBA tracking stats, which is just really good. And I think that's being able to stop. And I think for him, it's like one a game that he shoots maybe. So it's not like he does it that often, and he tends to be wide open when he does it, which is another point towards his decision-making there. He still is able to make that. I do think it's a little bit unnatural for him to shoot a pull-up 2 from that area because his shot's kind of weird. One foot's way in front of the other. His shoulders kind of back. It's not like this natural
shot or like a
There's no smooth. It's not like Booker or Paul shooting from mid range. There's no sort of smooth, all body moving and sort of one motion shot from mid range. No, he'll take that dribble, a hard dribble around a screen, and then just stop on a dime. And then the player's backing up and backpedaling because they know he can finish at the rim really well. And then he'll be wide open, and then he can shoot that mid-range shot. So it's not. I don't think that that's going to be like a major part of his game going forward because mechanically it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But he's still relatively good at it, much better at shooting that shot than I anticipated when I looked up the stats. One thing I want to bring up too, and I think we should talk about his defense here too because I think it's pretty damn good, especially statistically. But effort. Now, effort is something that we've talked about. Some guys need to improve on. Some guys are good at it. Cameron Payne is always good at effort. Like, he is 100% all the time. He never slows down his effort. Look, whether that be defensively or offensively, putting the right pressure offensively or defensively. Now, there are things we can talk about defensively later. But effort-wise, I'm thinking there's a famous clip that I posted online of him boxing out Zion Williamson, right? And that's not a one-time thing. If he gets switched onto a big guy defensively, he's going hard. He's going hard at that big guy. He's not conceding the points and just getting back on offense. He's just going to make it as difficult as possible, whether that be boxing out, denying the ball defensively, or playing up and trying to make a guy uncomfortable. And I think effort is one of those things that it's immeasurable. You have to really watch the games to understand the level of effort that someone's bringing on a night-to-night basis. But when someone brings 100% effort in every single game, it's a skill. And it's hard to argue that it's not a skill. And Cameron Payne has the effort skill. He never lets up his effort. It's always there every single game, whether that be in the playoffs or a random regular season game. He's giving it all. And I think this is to your point, Sam, about him being sort of your favorite player on the team, even though he's not necessarily a star. I think does that have something? Am I wrong to assume that his effort all the time has something to do with that, Sam?
No, not at all. That's, you like hard workers. It's a classic thing that I think exists as a trope for basically everyone. Yeah, Cam's effort really stands out, especially when you think about what the Suns' depth chart was. Like, how risky is it for him to sacrifice his body in guarding Zion and Rudy Gobert? I remember at one time, and you posted a couple other clips throughout the season, but like going up against those guys when you know that if you take an elbow to the wrong place and suddenly you're out for 2 weeks or a month or whatever, Etuan Moore is going to be, no offense, but Etuan Moore is going to be that third string point guard, or Javon Carter is going to be that third string point guard. Cam was really critical to play as many minutes for the Suns as he did last year, even if he was a backup. And the fact that that didn't affect the way that he played defense is definitely inspirational.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a good point to bring up, is there's like face mask LeBron, untucked Kyrie, and like hoodie Melo, and there's Cam Payne on a mismatch in the post. You're not going to score on him. He's just so, like, it's that Chris Paul gene where it's like a competitive edge. Like, he takes it personal in a way. And whether it's boxing out or just guarding in the post and, forcing them to throw it away, like, it's really impressive. And I think that just comes down to effort. He's always sprinting back on defense. Like, just looking at the little things, just going back, looking at his film recently, just he sprints, like, literally all the time. Like, everywhere he goes, he's sprinting. So... yeah. I think that just kind of translates to everything he does on the court, and that injection of reality of getting demoted and losing his job in the league kind of was a reality check that he probably needed to understand that it's not going to be easy. So I think that's something that's just going to be a part of him going forward. He's not going to forget what got him here, and he's definitely going to want another contract. So I think this is just the beginning, and. I'll just throw this take out there. I think he's the point guard of the future for the Suns.
Wow.
And we've talked about it before.
Let's hold off on that. Let's talk about that at the end.
I'm interested because we've brought up the prospect of that. Before on this podcast, but we've seen a lot more of him now, I think.
I think we can save that overall conversation for the end when we talk about confidence. But what I will say, just to your point, Mike, about just effort being a skill, it is absolutely 100% a skill. There's no doubt. Because if it wasn't, everyone would be doing it. But when you see Cam doing this, like we talk about him changing speeds on offense, he's also changing speeds on defense. He's like, it's just another gear that he shifts into. Cam's a 12-speed bike. A lot of these other guys are 7 speeds. When you compare the two of them side by side, the difference becomes clear.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think we should talk about defense in general. Now, I almost want to say that defense is an area of improvement, and I think there are areas that he can improve defensively. But it's hard to argue that it's a negative. I think he's a positive defender. I think his team defense is good. He's smart, like we talked about on switches. He's going to give 100% effort on those switches. He's going to deny the ball. He's going to push up on them. He's going to take an elbow to the face. He's going to get in their uncomfortable spaces and try to make it as uncomfortable as possible for those players. But also in perimeter defense, he's good. Like, he's a good perimeter defender. When we talk about just watching him play defense, he's good. But also, like, graded out on the B-ball index stats that we've been using in all these podcasts, he's really good at it. Like, I mean, there are elements that he can get better at, but like his pickpocket rating, like one of the ones for steals, he's an A-. Loose ball recovery rate, I love this one specifically for Cameron Payne. So recovering a loose ball when it's available, he's an A- there too. He's one of the tops in the league in that, which is an effort stat.
If you rank out in the 100th percentile for that one, it's just a picture of Javon Carter on the spreadsheet.
It's just his face. And deflections he rates relatively well in. Steals he rates relatively well in. And he gives a lot of effort defensively. He's never really a problem, I think, defensively. We saw guys getting targeted in the playoffs. I think towards the end of the playoffs and finals, it was Chris Paul, I think, the majority of the time. It's rare that teams tried to target Cameron Payne over. I mean, they do try, but I don't think that it's like a really beneficial tactic for the other team. I think in most cases he does relatively well defensively. What do you think about his defense, Brandon?
I think you kind of nailed everything so far as far as his activity and the team defense. He's smart. He knows where to be, and honestly, it's kind of tough on this Suns team to be a bad team defender just because of how good everyone is across the board, like in their system. Like, I think everyone's just so well prepared. You'd really kind of almost have to go out of your way to be a poor team defender. And I think that's why for someone like Devin Booker, the effort in terms of like this is kind of off topic a little bit, but I'll tie it back into Payne. The workload that someone like Book has as far as offensively and defensively just throughout the game, it's a lot harder to sustain that level of engagement defensively. Whereas someone like Payne, he's only playing 18 minutes a game in the regular season. In the playoffs, he had a little bit more responsibility, but the one knock, and it's not even really a knock on him, it's just his sample size. Like, it's a lot easier to have that energy and effort when you're playing in those short bursts. So that's why I think there is risk involved in terms of what is he going to sacrifice if you give this guy the keys to the franchise as far as like being that point guard of the future. Can he play those long minutes? Because like this season, he only played, I think it was 6 games with 25 or more minutes during the regular season and 5 of those during the playoffs. So it's an 11-game sample size, and the numbers are incredible, actually. It's 16.7 points and 6.7 assists with a true shooting of 62.4 with 74 assists to 20 turnovers and a plus 89 in those games. So offensively, there wasn't really a downfall with him. But defensively, that's my one concern is, like, can he sustain that for long periods of time? That's just something that we don't know yet, because it's easy to be that microwave guy and go all out all the time. But, you know, can he do that for 30, 35 minutes a game?
Well, I'll be honest, I almost sort of hope we don't find out, because that would mean
not
something
anytime
bad.
soon.
That would mean something bad happened to Chris Paul. Now, I do think there's an extra 5 minutes per game for him this year, though, that, an opportunity that he could seize. Chris Paul goes down from, say, 31, 32 to like 27, 28. I could totally see that. So, gradually, progressively, we'll see it, I think. Yeah,
not to mention, Monty really didn't start playing Cameron Payne with Chris Paul until like the last month and a half of the season. And that worked really well. Like at that point of the season, it just started to make a lot of sense. And we'll see, Sam, if Shamet takes some of those minutes. But I have a feeling, if Cameron Payne can continue to hit catch and shoot threes at that high of a level, which I really have no reason to believe that he won't be able to at this point. It makes sense to have another ball handler on the floor with Chris Paul when you can. So opening up the minutes when Chris Paul is playing to not necessarily have just like Devin Booker or somebody who's a bigger player to be able to defend, and adding Cameron Payne to that mix could open up more minutes for him there as well. So yeah, I think you're right that there could be more opportunities for him. And look, it's hard to argue that he hasn't earned it too. He's hitting his shots. His isolation efficiency is like at a star level. Like it's a star level isolation efficiency, and that's not an exaggeration. And it's not on a small number. Like he is isolating quite a bit for a player in his position.
And on that point, because we're only sort of just now talking about the whole dual guard thing of multiple guys who could put the ball on the floor in the same lineup. The Suns didn't really ever go to the 3-guard lineup this year. They did it for like maybe 10 minutes all season. I remember seeing it a couple times and like doing the Leo meme at my TV and like pointing. There it is.
Because we were desperate for it on this podcast.
We talked about it multiple times. Are we all in agreement that it depends on matchup, it depends on opponent, but that would work, I think.
Yes.
I really think it would work. To borrow a term from Igor, rest in peace, wherever he is, but, you've got 3 guys who statistically have demonstrated that they are good in pick-and-roll offense. So you get those 3 guys on the court at the same time, and you put the defense in a blender. You run multiple actions, multiple side-to-side movements between the 3 of them on the perimeter. Good things would happen.
I agree, especially when the offense is stagnant or in one of those ruts where it seems like no one can get a shot. Why not?
Yes, I agree. For the record, Igor Kokoshkov is coaching Luka Doncic now as an assistant coach.
Him and Jared Dudley.
On the Dallas Mavericks.
Suns legends. They're everywhere.
Forgot about that.
He got there eventually.
Good for him.
But I'll say, just from a general perspective, I think there has never been a scenario where more ball handling and more shot creation has made a team worse. It just makes teams better. So putting more and more on the floor at a time is never a bad thing, especially when guys like specifically Cameron Payne is so effective at shooting in a catch-and-shoot scenario. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll get into the ways that Cameron Payne can improve, which I think will be a very interesting aspect of this conversation. We'll be right back. All right, let's talk about Cameron Payne and how he can improve. The internal development of Cameron Payne, which, I'll be honest with you guys, I kind of struggled. Finding areas for him to improve, because with Cameron Payne,
perfect.
He's good at shooting. He's good at creating his own offense. He's kind of like if Daryl Morey created a backup point guard robot. It would just be Cameron Payne.
He's got like the plus 6 or 7 inches on his wingspan that like everyone tries to draft for, right?
Yeah.
And then just hits threes and makes layups.
He never really shoots mid-range shots, like almost never, which, I mean, I guess you could say is a negative, but like he's insanely efficient at the rim. He's insanely efficient at the three-point line. He's a good decision maker, and he plays solid defense. So coming up with areas, other than like just a general idea of he can improve at all of these things a little bit, which is kind of how we talked about Cameron Johnson. Except with Cameron Payne, he does so much for himself. And I know we're on to the part of the conversation where we talk about ways he can improve. But just to give you a stat on what he can do for himself, his catch and shoot to pull up three-pointer ratio is 58% to 42%. That means that 42% of his three-point shots are pull-up shots. That's a huge margin. It's like a really, really large margin of his shots as pull-up shots. So, like, he does so much for himself and does so much on his own that it becomes a little bit difficult to find ways, or for me, it was a little difficult to find things that he can improve on. I still found stuff, of course. I mean, we're doing this episode, so of course I did find stuff. But I'm going to put you guys on the spot first before I get into what I wrote down. So, Brandon, when you think about how Cameron Payne can improve, what's something that comes to mind for you?
I'm in total agreement with you. This is definitely the most difficult thing to grasp, as far as like it feels like you're almost like nitpicking or going out of your way. But
that's what we do here. That's our specialty.
We do a podcast every week. We have to nitpick.
True. But yeah, I would say there's nothing like glaringly obvious, but for me, and this is something he's actually improved on throughout this season, just heading into the playoffs, you can notice it, is just being a point guard, like just knowing how to facilitate, balancing out when to attack, when to create for himself, and also when to create for others. And the main thing, if he wants to play next to Booker more often, is just knowing when to get the hell out of his way. And I think he's done a really good job of doing that. And I think the growth he showed in the playoffs kind of makes me a lot more comfortable in him being a point guard. Like that 29-point, 9 assists, 0 turnover game in Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals against an elite defense is just like, can we talk about that? Like that's just insane.
Yeah, I mean, 0 turnovers. I mean, yeah,
that's a Chris Paul type of stat line. So that's not normal from a backup point guard that doesn't really have that experience in the playoffs to just come in and do that. Like it takes a lot of balls, first off, to score 29 points without 0 turnovers and also get those 9 dimes. Like he was in complete control of the game. So I think being in that mode, obviously he doesn't have to put up stat lines like that every night, but just learning how to be a point guard is probably the one thing I think that he's getting better at, but there's still room for improvement with like shot selection at times, or he's really good at finishing at the rim, but sometimes in that little floater, like mid-range area, like he doesn't commit to his shot. So like Mike was saying, just adding that mid-range game is kind of the next step. And that's the main thing. I think offensively, you look at his repertoire and there's everything in his bag. It's just that midi that isn't there. And it might not be for the best for it to, or it might be for the best for it not to be there. Sorry. But he's just, because of how his shot is so awkward. So overall, I think it's just kind of incrementally getting better at a lot of things. But yeah.
Sam, what do you think?
With learning how to be a point guard, to use what you said, Brandon, I'll kind of take that trail and continue it on in a little bit of a different direction. I focused in on his playmaking. Now, I'll start off by saying Cam averaged, I think it was 7 assists per 36 this year. He also had a really good assist-to-turnover ratio by any kind of objective measure there.
Yeah.
He's a good playmaking point guard. His playmaking stats are good. Where I think he can start to improve and where I'm going to nitpick is understanding the pace of the offense, specifically in terms of not so much like when you get shots off, but keeping guys engaged and happy. and knowing how to balance the offense of who gets the ball when.
Exactly.
The reason I brought this up, or the thing that tipped me off to this, I mentioned, I don't remember if it was in another internal development episode anymore, if it was like weeks ago, but I mentioned at one point that Payne played like 300, 400, a non-insignificant amount of minutes with DeAndre Ayton this season. And I noticed that he only assisted DeAndre Ayton in all that time, enough time for them to play a stint together every game. Obviously, one guy's a starter, the other guy's a backup, but they're still playing a stint of 5, 6, 7 minutes every game. And in all that time throughout the season, Cam only assisted Ayton 10 times, which I laid out the stats, was much lower than I don't have them in front of me right now, but was much lower of a rate than Chris Paul, was much lower of a rate than Devin Booker. Simply put, he was struggling to find DeAndre Ayton, which for a guy who we typically think of as a good pick-and-roll point guard, can get his own offense and can play make, was bizarre. And it was also a bit of a red flag, something that made me want to go and dig deeper. And so what I did is I had to do these stats manually, but I specifically tallied up the percentage of each lead ball handler's assists on the Suns that went to bigs. So basically DeAndre Ayton plus Dario Saric plus Frank Kaminsky, those are the main bigs. There are a couple from to Damian Jones from the beginning of the season, which I didn't count because it was such a small, tiny percentage. But what I found was Booker led the way here, with 35% of his assists going to the Suns bigs. CP3 was next with 32% of his assists. Cam was down by a lot, with 23% of his assists going to a combination of Ayton, Saric, and Kaminsky. Now, that's not inherently a bad thing because it means that where did Cam get his extra proportion of assists from? He often got them from driving and kicking, so he got more to Jay Crowder, more to Mikal Bridges, more to Cam Johnson than those other guys. But what he didn't really do such a good job of this year was he didn't develop this chemistry with DeAndre Ayton where he could just get the first step, blow by a guy, and then toss up the lob, right? Which theoretically he should be able to do. He didn't necessarily develop a great chemistry with Dario Saric or Frank Kaminsky. I mean, he would find them maybe once or twice a game, but not as much as you would expect with pocket passes. For a guy who has his playmaking talent and his poise, the ratio is just a little bit off there. And so I think that's going to be really key this year, specifically as he's playing with JaVale McGee, who is a guy who, yes, is a veteran, but in spite of that, is a guy you want to keep engaged. And the way you keep JaVale McGee engaged, if he's only playing 15 minutes a game, you need his defensive presence. You need to keep him happy on offense. You need to develop that alley-oop chemistry basically from the get-go. And so he needs to do a better job of doing that with JaVale than he did with DeAndre. I have no qualms really about his ability to do it, but I did think it was a little bit interesting when I really dug into the stats of, Cam isn't really, he's not throwing those lob passes like we would expect, and I wonder why that is.
Yeah, I think it's it makes sense. I think it just makes sense that that's where his passes go because he doesn't shoot mid-range shots, so the defense isn't really coming up to him in that mid-range area that allows the space for somebody like DeAndre Ayton to cut in and get the ball with the defense leaving that space at the rim. So essentially the space that Cameron Payne eats up, the space that he needs, is at the rim as well. So he's sort of competing for space with DeAndre Ayton. If DeAndre Ayton was allowed to shoot that mid-range shot more often, I think Cameron Payne could have found him more in that mid-range area when he draws the defense in. And it sort of makes sense that he struggles to find him there. And in ways that we've talked about before with DeAndre Ayton, shooting and passing and finding guys is related. It's symbiotic. If he was able to hit that mid-range shot more often or more willing to shoot that mid-range shot, then he probably would be able to find somebody like DeAndre Ayton or JaVale McGee more at the rim. And I agree with both of you guys with this. I wrote down running a team because it's not necessarily passing, because he's good at passing, and it's not even necessarily decision making because he does make good decisions, but it's sort of this sort of understanding of the moment. It's the things that Chris Paul is good at. And talk about a great scenario for him to come back to the NBA. Ricky Rubio, who's a great mentor, but then going directly from that to Chris Paul and playing behind Chris Paul, maybe the best guy in the league at understanding the moment and being able to learn from him, is really the perfect scenario for someone like Cameron Payne, and the ability for him to learn in this scenario is going to be really beneficial for him. But to me, it's no surprise that he's not necessarily finding those guys at the rim, but I still think he can do it better. And I think towards the end of the season and in the playoffs, DeAndre Ayton specifically got much better at sort of the trailing cut on the pick and roll, which is like Ayton was setting the screen and rolling immediately, because that's what Chris Paul needs him to do. It gives Chris Paul space for mid-range, and if they guard Chris Paul in mid-range, he's able to get that at the rim and for the lob. But if Ayton can trail a little bit more on that pick and roll, set the screen, pause, allow Cameron Payne to get to the rim, then roll, I think that it's a harder pass to make, but I think Cameron Payne is good at making it. That sort of bounce pass, and obviously Ayton's hands need to be on for this to work. But it did work in the playoffs, and I think Ayton could get more shots off of Cameron Payne, and I think that's a chemistry thing. He plays a lot more with Chris Paul. He does play with Cameron Payne, but I think they can find ways to do that better. And you're right. If Ayton starts to lose focus, if Cameron Payne is starting some games, it's on Payne. And, it's on Booker too, but it's on Payne at that point to get him back into it, and that's part of being a point guard. Anything else stand out to you, Brandon, that you had for his improvement?
Yeah, that was actually on my note sheet, so I'm glad Sam brought up that point. I was going through like who he assisted to and who assisted him the most. So I think just developing that chemistry like you were talking about with bigs, that'll come over time. But I think in the playoffs, where one way where DeAndre is going to feast is just in that weak side dunker spot with Payne getting downhill. And like I remember specifically Zubac a few times in games 1 and 2 would come down to help on Payne, and DeAndre would just do, it wasn't even like an all-out roll to the rim, it was kind of like a half sell just to where he had enough space to get to the rim with one dribble, and Payne found him on consecutive possessions. So I do think there's something to build off there, and it might not come directly off the pick and roll, just using guys in the dunker spot or weak side, just kind of like how I was mentioning with his downhill gravity to help like shooters in the corner get open. That could be applied to bigs as well. So I think there's some different schemes they can try to get that flowing. But overall, I think that'll just come with time. And again, we're sort of going out of our way to like look for these little things he can improve on. And overall, I think that just running a team and like running the offense, controlling everything is just really something that comes with reps as well. So like you said, there's no one better than Chris Paul to learn from, and Monty as well. So I think he's just in the right place, and it's only going to get better.
Yeah. And I think this actually goes to the point that Sam's been making, reputation lagging behind the reality of it. He isolates so much. So on a pick and roll, it's often that Cameron Payne will just wait for the switch. They'll switch on to him. He'll get a big man on him, and then he'll back up and he'll attack in an isolation scenario. And it's not necessarily a pick and roll the same way that it is with Devin Booker and Chris Paul. Sometimes Booker does that, but you're sort of boxing out for the rebound when Booker does it. Right now, they're allowing that big to guard Cameron Payne one-on-one most of the time. They're not sending another guy at him when he runs at the rim. If they start to send that other guy at him, which they could as early as next year, he needs to make that right pass, especially if they're coming off of DeAndre Ayton, which is the guy that, or JaVale McGee, which is the guys that it makes the most sense to send that second guy at Cameron Payne. And you're isolating so much from that scenario, you have to find ways to pass if they start sending that second guy at you. But they haven't done it yet. So I imagine they will do it soon, right?
But you can see how Cam being 6'1" and again, athletic, crafty, but not the most explosive. If they start sending that extra defender at you, it's going to affect him in a way that it wouldn't necessarily affect other guys. Like he can't just rise up over the top of two defenders and dunk it. He's going to start getting those layups swatted if they send extra attention. So he needs to understand what that means and make the right play, but I think he can.
Yeah, and I think there's a parallel between Payne and the Suns as a whole. Like, they're both going to have a target on their back this year. Like, they're not going to catch people by surprise. So with Payne, he's going to be pretty high on the scouting reports priority list as far as worrying about him torching your second unit. So I think, by the time the playoffs roll around, obviously he was, the Clippers' number one focus, and it didn't really matter. But just over the course of the season, just seeing how he's going to adjust to teams taking him more seriously, I guess, is the best way to put it. But, overall, just really pleased with his development. And like I said, the hot take is I think he can handle that load whenever it comes. I'm going to enjoy Chris Paul for as long as I can, and I hope it's forever. Mm-hmm. But there will come a time where Father Time wins, so we can talk about that later.
Well, you go, Mike.
Sorry, I just want to bring it up again, just to reiterate. In the playoffs, 29, 9, and 0 turnovers, 12 of 24 shot 50% from the field, 75% from the free throw line. Like, just a very good game for Cameron Payne in the playoffs. The next game, he played 4 minutes because he rolled his ankle early in the game, and early in the game for him when he first checked into the game. And then he never was really quite the same after that in the playoffs. I think he had a good stretch in the NBA Finals, and maybe towards the end. Well, not really, actually. When looking at the stats here game by game, he never really was quite right. I think he was playing on a bum ankle for the rest of the playoffs.
He had one stretch in Milwaukee, like game 5 or 6, where he kept the Suns in it for a quarter before they lost. But other than that, he wasn't right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was game 6 where he had 10 points. But yeah, and he was plus 9. But yeah, he was never really quite right after that, and I think that's why we have not really had the chance to really appreciate just how good he was in this last season, because he sort of ended it on a down side of his game. And just to reiterate that the importance of that one game, though, it was massive. I mean, for a guy like him to come in and do that was really incredible. There's one other thing, and I know, Sam, it sounded like you wanted to transition to the part of the conversation, which I think this will work for him as far as confidence in his improvement, and then we can tie that directly to specifically whether or not we're confident that he could be the point guard of the future for this team. Just one other nitpicky thing I want to talk about. In the playoffs specifically, he got a little too aggressive defensively, and he was picking up some dumb fouls, which, I don't know, maybe that's the Devin Booker influence a little bit for Cameron Payne. But there were times where he was just swiping at guys for no reason, like literally no reason, and getting up in their face. I mean, I think there was the famous Alex Caruso moment in the Lakers series where for some reason Cameron Payne was ejected, but he was getting on guys' nerves, and that part is good. But picking up those dumb fouls, I think, in intense moments of the game was kind of something I think he needs to work on a little bit too defensively. Before we get into the conversation about confidence, was there anything else defensively that stood out to you guys that you think Cameron Payne could improve on? I'll take that as a no.
Truthfully, I'm pretty pleased with his defense.
Yeah, it's hard to find anything that really stands out. Obviously, there's like little things, but nothing significant.
Yeah, I think there are like ways that I think he could. The things that he's good at, and this is the conversation with all these guys once again, are commonly the things that make guys better. They improve at the things they're good at. That's what makes them a better player. He's already good at defense, so he can get a little bit better at the things he's good at, like moving his feet. I think effort is already there, so like for him, the effort isn't an issue for defense, but everything else I think he could get a little bit better at.
And so good Sam, health. Good health aside. I mean, he's 26, so
yeah,
the athleticism is still going to be there.
Mm-hmm. So, Sam, I think you wanted to transition to the part of the conversation about confidence that he can be the starting point guard of the future. What do you think?
Right. I mean, Brandon's brought that up a couple times. So I think, I am at the point where I'm reasonably confident that Cam can be a starting point guard in the NBA. And I think you can just pause there and consider where he came from.
Mm-hmm.
And that right there is insane. Like the fact that he was out of the league to being I think he could be a starting point guard in the NBA. Now, that is much different from being a starting point guard on a good NBA playoff team. And I think that's where we kind of got to think about either Cam is really good at a lot of things at this point, but I think he either needs to become more elite at a couple of things to really fill the shoes of Chris Paul in the way that Chris Paul does, or the rest of the Suns roster, maybe he can be a starting point guard on a really good playoff team, but the rest of the Suns roster needs to compensate somehow. Because I think you can admit, I do believe he can get better. To expect him to completely fill in for Chris Paul, given what Chris Paul was doing this year, the getting automatic buckets in the mid-range, having 40-plus point performances in the playoffs, I don't have to say that those are big shoes to fill.
What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, no, those are all valid points. I think my main take on this is like part of it is confidence in Cam Payne. The other part is just Devin Booker. Like looking at him long term, you want the ball in his hands more. I think, just in general offensively. So playing him next to a guard that can play off ball like a Payne and also provide that downhill threat. To me, it's a great fit in terms of like what they can do on the court, and also, like Sam mentioned, everyone else on the team getting 10% better, like in the long term.
Yeah.
So for me, I've never really thought the Suns needed a Chris Paul type point guard next to Devin Booker. Just like looking at the long term, I'm glad they did it. I think he's definitely necessary in the short term, but like if this team's going to reach its full peak, I don't think you need a ball dominant point guard. I think you could have someone like a Payne that can balance the playmaking and scoring with Booker. And the numbers show that. I mean, it's not a huge sample size, but it's pretty solid. In 659 minutes, the two-man lineup with Booker and Payne, and I get it, it's a two-man lineup, had a 7.1 net rating. And, Paul and Booker in about double those minutes had a 6.9. So they're right at that same pace with those two on the court. There's not a noticeable drop-off. And I'm not saying he's, as good as Chris Paul. He's not. But I think just looking long term and seeing the rest of these guys improve to the point to where, do you need a star point guard for this team to reach its peak? Like, obviously you want one.
Right.
If there's someone that becomes available, like James Jones will pull the trigger 100%. But if the time comes where you need a point guard, he is the candidate that's already knows the system. It's going to be a seamless transition, and hopefully it's not anytime soon. But to me, like I do think he could be a starting point guard on a good playoff team, and I think he's going to continue to get better.
I mean, I definitely think he'll continue to get better. If you think that he can sustain what he's doing over a starting workload, then you just look at like what his per 36 minutes were this year, and per 36, he was giving you about 16 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists. Just from a quick glance at that, like, that feels to me like what Cam could do as a starter. Like, I think he could give you 16 and 7 as a starter. That's a good player on solid efficiency without committing many turnovers. That is absolutely a good player, and we have seen many a team win an NBA championship with a point guard who is worse than a guy who gives you 16 and 7.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't come without the otherworldly Chris Paul IQ, like, definitely Booker needs to get his 10% better, like what you said, Brandon. And also, I'd feel a lot better about it, and I think this is totally feasible, if Mikal Bridges becomes like the 20, 22 point per game kind of second option type that I think maybe he could be. It requires him having a big leap in confidence and really understanding that his role has to change. But like if that happens, then yeah, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with Cam being in that position for sure.
Yeah. I guess I have to be the guy that says that I do think Devin Booker needs another guy like Chris Paul, even in the long term. And it's not necessarily like a ball dominant point guard. There needs to be another, and I'm going to use quotes here, ball dominant player next to Devin Booker in order for the Suns to reach their potential or the championship level. Because that's how championship level teams operate. There's always multiple quote unquote ball dominant players because ball dominant players are usually stars. And that means that if Cameron Payne becomes the starting point guard for the Phoenix Suns, they need another guy besides Devin Booker and Cameron Payne that's a star and that's considered a ball dominant player. So whether that be at the 3, 4, or 5, whatever other positions available to them, that would be the scenario where I could see Cameron Payne being because I don't see Cameron Payne ever being like a star in this league. I think he could be a high-level starter, potentially. But if he's like the other guy that's the main ball handler for your team, there's a ceiling to that team that's not very high, in my opinion.
You kind of run into the Conley-Mitchell problem, is what you're saying, maybe?
In a sense. I don't know that he's even that... I don't know that he's... Yeah.
I mean,
even that good. But.
Even a Mike Conley... I was thinking more like a 33-year-old Mike Conley, not like a prime Mike Conley.
Okay, yeah. That's like a Conley-Mitchell problem this last season. Yeah.
You're
that's
right,
a good way to... That's a good way to put it. And, unless somebody like Mikal Bridges, who I think is the guy that we've sort of, in this series, I think he's the guy that stood out to me as the guy that could be the guy that takes on a larger role as far as ball handling. And I still kind of don't feel like he can really get there at a star level of that. So, yeah, I don't know. I would be nervous if that were the case. Losing Chris Paul, you lose a lot. And I understand factoring in these guys getting better. I'm banging the same drum I've been banging throughout this offseason. When Chris Paul gets old, and it'll happen at some point, I don't know when it'll happen. Maybe it won't happen till he's 40. But when it does happen, the Suns need another offensive fulcrum to put next to Devin Booker in order to compete for a championship. And none of the guys that are on the team currently stand out as a guy that can be that, and that includes Cameron Payne. And that means that at some point you need to replace that thing that Chris Paul does. Now, doesn't necessarily mean a ball-dominant point guard, but that thing of being able to be a fulcrum for the offense is something that you'd have to replace, because you need multiple versions of that guy in order to be able to do that. So, well, I guess my answer is yes, I think he can be the point guard of the future for the Suns, but it depends on the makeup of the rest of the team.
Yeah.
Of the rest of the team. But what do you think about that, Brandon?
No, that's a great answer, and I completely agree. I think they do need another outlet that they can go to that can create for themselves and get buckets, because that's what this is all about. And I don't think that's going to be the point guard position, whether it's Mikal. I have a lot of confidence in him, but even if it's not him, just looking to when Chris Paul comes off the books, there's definitely potential for a trade down the line too. So that could come in the form of, I'm just going to throw some names out and probably piss some people off, but why not?
Wow, that's a bold move. Okay, go
Jason
for it.
Tatum, Pascal Siakam, just having another wing or someone that you can throw the ball to and get buckets in the half court.
What if I told you Mikal could become Jason Tatum?
I would not call you crazy, because I love Mikal Bridges. That's ideal.
I think that's crazy, for the record. It's just dribbling.
Yeah.
I mean, dribbling.
Wait and see.
I would say
it's just dribbling.
Chris Middleton is the one
soon.
I like to throw out there, but I don't know if he's going to. I mean, there's 4 or 5 more leaps he has to take to get to that level.
I think for Chris Middleton to be your number 2 and win a championship, your number 1 needs to be Giannis. And I love Devin Booker, but he ain't no Giannis.
Yeah.
Not yet.
So, yeah. But basically, long story short, I'm not sure a point guard is necessarily, it has to be that second creator with Booker. I think there's a lot of other creative ways you can find that. It's tough. These guys don't grow on trees, obviously. We know that.
Yeah.
But with the way, Booker plays, I think you could build a championship team with Cam Payne as a starting point guard. But now, obviously, that comes with who do you have around those guys, and you're going to need another reliable guard on your bench. So there's a lot of nuance to this discussion that we can't really predict. But long term, I think Payne definitely has another leap in him. So that's something I factor in as well. And I'm just excited to see these two grow with each other, and the second unit in general, just looking at Payne, Shamet, and Johnson, that's really really good. I was about to drop an F-bomb. Not sure if I'm allowed to cuss on it.
Yeah, you definitely are.
It's going to be really fucking good. So that trio is just going to be a lot of fun. And
add McGee in there,
he's
too.
He's going to bring that interior threat that they're kind of lacking with, just having another rim threat and an outlet for Cam Payne to just kind of, on those drives, just throw up. And, I think that weak side dunker spot's going to be where JaVale's just going to feast, because he's always in the right spot. He knows what he gets paid for. And that's just being around the rim and dunking on people. So, that second unit's just going to be hell on wheels, and I can't wait.
Yeah, he's got great timing on his cuts as well.
Mm-hmm.
Since I'm sorry to use the Cameron Payne podcast to just bring this name up, but as soon as Donovan Mitchell requests a trade, you better believe I'll be making some fake trades for the Phoenix Suns as well, just to see, because I love the idea of a Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker backcourt. Just for the record, if that ever happens, I know that would be complicated and weird, and also Suns fans would have mixed feelings about it. But boy, would that be fun! I
disagree. I don't think anyone would have mixed feelings about it if it actually happened.
Suns fans have mixed feelings about the Utah Jazz franchise and the state of Utah. Yeah. In my experience, that's what who actually hates Donovan Mitchell, the person? He's done nothing to deserve that.
Yeah, could you imagine if we took Donovan Mitchell from them? That's a victory lap for the ages. That's something you should flex on Utah for the rest of your life if you do that. So I agree, that'd be an awesome fit, but.
As a guy who makes a fake trade every week, apparently, Suns fans have mixed feelings about every single player in the NBA that's not a Phoenix Suns player. For the record, I can make a fake trade. I can make a fake trade right now for Steph Curry, and there will be some Suns fans that are mad. I can make a fake trade right now for LeBron James, and there will be some Suns fans that will be mad. Or, for example, Karl Anthony Towns. If I made a fake trade right now for Karl Anthony Towns, there will be some Suns fans that are mad. Yes.
Yeah. Well, you can't. You can't have 100% approval on anything. If there's anything we know, it's that.
And fake trades are the most dangerous game in the NBA media business. I think you're asking for people to be mad at that point. But back to Cameron Payne. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about as far as confidence of the things that he can improve? Because I feel like his shooting is sort of at a level where maybe he'll get slightly better at pull-up three-point shooting, which would be a remarkable thing because it's already just extremely, extremely good. Obviously we talked about that mid-range area. Maybe he'll get better at pulling up from mid-range, but I think mechanically that seems like not a super likely thing to happen for him, in my opinion. Defensively, we talked about it. I mean, there are things he can improve, but it's just not. I mean, we get slightly better. Is there anything else that stands out to you guys as something that you're confident that he'll improve at as early as next season?
I would just say familiarity with the team, just getting all those reps is really going to help him. Just the continuity in general, I think that's going to help with him running the offense and finally finding a home. That's kind of underrated for a lot of players in general. And now that he's, got the bag secured and he's here for 3 years and he really wants to be here in a system that is so player friendly and is predicated on, getting people involved. I think just continuing to just learn how to be a point guard, run the offense, the lob, throwing up the lobs to JaVale should make his life easier, and hopefully that translates with DeAndre too when he's in that first unit. Yeah, I think the chemistry with him and Booker too is just another reason why I'm so confident in that. Booker assisted him on 21 of his 83 assisted made field goals, and the second closest on the team wasn't even in double digits. So, obviously they played with each other quite a bit, and Booker's going to get, the lion's share of those assists. But just seeing that shows that I think those two kind of have a special chemistry, and maybe we'll see some more three-guard lineups because it's a long season.
Hope so. It's funny. Internal development, we named this series that because of the number of times we were using that phrase. It was just tongue-in-cheek, and continuity, I think, is quickly becoming our next catchphrase. I think we've mentioned the power of continuity and what it can do in every single episode. But I stand by it, and I think that's going to be, we all talked about Cam's feel as a point guard and the way he gets guys involved and makes decisions and whatnot, and I do think continuity is going to help with that.
Right. Let me quickly just send Cage a message to cue up the community theme song so we can make a continuity theme for our future episodes.
Perfect.
Shout out to Cage.
But yeah,
he's the man.
Yes, shout out to Cage who made our great video to promote this series of episodes. Yeah, and I think Cameron Payne, the thing about him is I'm fully confident he's going to work really hard on his game. And that's a nice place to be with a player when we're talking about development and internal development going forward. He's going to work hard. I know he will because he had to work hard to get here. And I know he's not going to take advantage of the opportunity that he was given and the payday that he got. And even that payday can be a lot more if he does well under this amazing contract that the Phoenix Suns gave him. I'm confident he's going to work hard. I'm confident he's going to improve almost as much as or more than any player that we've done in this series because we've seen it and we've seen the effort that he puts out there. It's just, I love Cameron Payne, and we all love Cameron Payne, I think, and that's why it's fun to do this episode, and it's been fun to talk to you, Brandon, and thank you very much for joining us. Make sure to follow Brandon at ZonaHoops_ on Twitter. Go to ZonaHoops.com, check out his website. They write about the Phoenix Suns there, other things as well, I'm sure. Brandon, is there anything else that you'd like to promote?
Yeah, a couple things. So first of all, thanks for having me on. This entire series is just a brilliant idea, and I think it's really cool to not only have the awesome guests you've had, but just bring it all together. And hopefully I can continue to get 5 to 10% better too, and internally develop with my content. But yeah, I guess the Sunnies are coming, and October 5th. Circle that on your calendars. It's going to be a really fun time. Other than that, just check me out, Zona Hoops.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to everyone who listened to our internal development series. This is our last episode about a player for the Phoenix Suns. Obviously, a lot more to talk about soon. The season is coming up. We'll be back very soon with our regular episodes previewing the next season of Phoenix Suns basketball. Thanks, everyone.